Marcus Thorne adjusted his $1,000 tie, a predator sizing up his domain. The polished mahogany of the boardroom table reflected his confident smirk. Beside him, his beautiful, ambitious protégée Tiffany gave his hand a subtle squeeze under the table. This meeting was his kingmaker. He was about to present his 5-year growth strategy to the mysterious new CEO of their parent company, Vanguard Holdings. A promotion to senior vice president was practically in his pocket. He just had to impress some corporate titan he'd never met. He leaned over to his rival David Chen, whispering with a smug chuckle, "Wish my wife could see this. She thinks my biggest decision of the day is what to have for dinner." Little did he know the biggest decision of his day had already been made for him by the very woman he so casually dismissed. The boardroom doors were about to open, and his entire world was about to burn to the ground. The morning sun, pale and indifferent, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse Marcus Thorne called home. It was a space designed for a magazine cover, all sharp lines, muted colors, and cold, impersonal art. It was a testament to success, a monument to ambition, and as sterile as an operating theater. Marcus stood before a full-length mirror, knotting a silk tie, the color of spilled wine. Every movement was precise, practiced a reflection of a man who believed he was in complete control of his universe. "Catherine, have you seen my sterling silver cufflinks, the ones from the Geneva trip?" He called out, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous living area. He didn't turn, simply watched his own reflection, admiring the cut of his Italian suit. From the kitchen, a space of gleaming stainless steel and marble that rarely saw any actual cooking, Catherine Vance emerged. She was dressed in simple grey yoga pants and a soft-worn cotton t-shirt. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her face was devoid of makeup. To an outsider, she was the picture of understated stay-at-home comfort. To Marcus, she was a part of the decor he had long since stopped noticing. "They're in your travel valet on the dresser, where they always are," she said, her voice even and calm. She held a mug of black coffee in her hands, the steam curling around her fingers. Marcus grunted, finding them exactly where she said. "Right. Big day today. The final presentation to the new Vanguard CEO." He clipped the cufflinks into place, the metallic click punctuating the silence. "This is it, Kate. The move to the C-suite. Everything I've been working for." "I'm sure you'll be wonderful, Marcus," she replied, taking a slow sip of her coffee. There was no excitement in her voice, only a quiet, observational tone that he found perpetually irritating. It was as if she were watching a play rather than living in the same reality as him. "You could try to sound a little more enthused," he chided, turning to finally face her. He scanned her appearance with a faint, almost imperceptible frown. "You know this apartment, your charity, lunches the life you have. It's all because of these big days." Catherine's eyes, a deep and intelligent shade of blue, met his. There was a flicker of something in them. Not anger, not sadness, but something far more complex. It was a look he hadn't been able to decipher for years. "I'm aware of what you provide, Marcus. I've never forgotten." The subtext was lost on him, or perhaps he chose to ignore it. He saw only the unassuming woman before him, the one who had abandoned her own promising career in software engineering 15 years ago, when he'd received his first major promotion. It was his narrative, the one he'd polished and perfected. Over time he had soared, and she had settled. He had graciously allowed her to retire into a life of leisure while he wrestled with the titans of industry. "I have to take Tiffany with me," he said, the statement sounding more like a declaration than a request for an opinion. "She was instrumental in compiling the data for the presentation. It's good exposure for a junior analyst." Catherine's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. Tiffany Hayes, the blonde from the marketing department, the one you mentored at the company retreat in Aspen. Marcus felt a brief, uncomfortable jolt. He hadn't realized Catherine paid that much attention. Yes, that's the one. She's bright, eager to learn. He conveniently omitted that Tiffany was 26, worshipped the ground he walked on, and had spent the previous evening in a hotel room with him, celebrating their pre-victory. Well, I hope her exposure is educational, Catherine said, turning to place her mug in the sink. The words were simple, yet they hung in the air with an odd weight. Marcus dismissed it as another one of her passive-aggressive moods. He grabbed his leather briefcase, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He paused at the door, looking back at his wife. She stood with her back to him, staring out the window at the sprawling Chicago skyline. For a fleeting moment, she seemed like a stranger in their home. "Don't wait up," he said the words a familiar refrain. "It's going to be a long day of meetings followed by a celebratory dinner." "Oh, I won't," Catherine replied, her voice soft but clear. "I have a very busy day myself. You have no idea." He chuckled a short, condescending sound. "Right. Shopping at Neiman Marcus or planning another fundraiser. Try not to strain yourself." He closed the door behind him, the solid thud sealing him out of her world and her into the gilded cage he had so carefully constructed. He walked to the elevator, a triumphant smile on his face, picturing Tiffany waiting for him in the lobby, her eyes bright with admiration, and something more. He felt powerful, untouchable, the king of his castle. Meanwhile, Catherine remained at the window, watching her husband's black sedan pull away from the curb 40 floors below. She took a deep breath, the first truly relaxed one she'd taken all morning. She pulled the band from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. She walked over to the sleek, minimalist coffee table and picked up a tablet. With a few taps, she pulled up a file. It was the complete acquisition portfolio of Innovate Dynamics, the company Marcus worked for, by her company Vanguard Holdings. She scrolled through the executive roster until she landed on his name, Marcus Thorne, Vice President of Marketing. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Enjoy your celebration, Marcus," she whispered to the empty, opulent room. "It's the last one you'll be having for a very long time." She then swiped to her calendar. Her first appointment at 10:00 a.m. was labeled in bold letters, "Board Meeting Introduction to Innovate Dynamics Senior Staff." The leather seats of Marcus's Mercedes were the color of rich cream, a stark contrast to the vibrant red of Tiffany Hayes's dress. The dress was a strategic choice, bold enough to be memorable, yet tailored enough to scream ambition rather than desperation. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, every strand of her honey blonde hair lacquered into a perfect sleek sheet. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her voice a purr. She ran a perfectly manicured finger along the dashboard. "You don't seem nervous at all. You seem like a god." Marcus laughed, a deep, confident sound that filled the car. "Nervous Tiffany nervousness is for the unprepared. We've been over this presentation 100 times. The numbers are solid. My strategy is revolutionary. This new CEO, whoever he is, will have no choice but to be impressed." He emphasized a casual assumption, based on the aggressive acquisition tactics Vanguard Holdings was known for. "And me?" she asked, turning in her seat to face him fully. "Will they be impressed with me? They'll see a sharp, dedicated analyst who supports her vice president," he said, reaching over to place a hand on her knee. He gave it a possessive squeeze. "Just stick to the script. Let me do the talking unless I direct a question to you. Answer concisely. Look smart. That's all you need to do. This is my show." Tiffany's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. She craved the spotlight, but she understood the hierarchy. For now she was his accessory, the brilliant but subordinate mind who helped the great Marcus Thorne achieve his destiny. Her time would come. She believed his promises that once he was promoted, he would create a new director position just for her, and that he would finally leave his boring, passionless wife. Catherine didn't seem to mind you taking me. She probed, testing the waters as she often did. Doesn't she ever get suspicious? Marcus scoffed, his eyes fixed on the traffic ahead. Kate. She stopped paying attention a decade ago. She lives in her own little world of charity benefits and book clubs. I doubt she even remembers your name. To her, you're just some intern I'm magnanimously giving a career boost. It's the perfect cover. The perfect cover. The phrase stung Tiffany more than she let on. She wasn't a cover. She was the future. She was the one who understood his ambition, who matched his drive. Catherine was a relic, a ghost from a past life he hadn't yet managed to shed. She just seems so placid, Tiffany mused. When I saw her at the company holiday party, she barely spoke. She just stood there smiling. It was kind of sad. It's not sad, it's comfortable, Marcus corrected. She has everything a woman could want without having to lift a finger. I gave her that. She should be grateful. He truly believed it. His guilt over the affair was a tiny, shriveled thing, easily overshadowed by his sense of magnanimity. He was providing for 2 women in his mind. He was a modern-day patriarch. They soon left the congested city streets behind, turning onto the private access road that led to the Vanguard Holdings corporate tower. The building was a spear of smoked glass and obsidian steel piercing the Chicago sky. It was a statement of raw, unapologetic power, dwarfing the more modest headquarters of Innovate Dynamics. As Marcus pulled into the reserved underground parking spot, a valet rushing to open their doors, Tiffany felt a genuine thrill of awe. This was the big league. This was where fortunes were made and empires were forged. Okay, Marcus said, turning to her before they stepped out. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the tight fit of her dress. You look perfect. Remember the plan. We're a team, but I'm the captain. Follow my lead, and by tonight, we'll be celebrating your future boss's promotion to senior vice president. He sealed the promise with a quick, hard kiss that tasted of coffee and ambition. They rode the silent high-speed elevator to the 60th floor, the penthouse level. The doors opened not into a reception area, but directly into a vast, minimalist foyer with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. The air was cool and smelled faintly of ozone and money. A severe-looking woman with a sharp haircut and a tablet greeted them. Mr. Thorne, Ms. Hayes, welcome to Vanguard. The board is gathering. Please follow me. She led them down a hallway, lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Marcus's car. Every person they passed was impeccably dressed, moving with a quiet urgency. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to the often complacent culture at Innovate Dynamics. Marcus felt his own confidence swell. He belonged here. This was his natural habitat. He glanced at Tiffany, who was trying her best to look composed, but whose wide eyes gave away her awe. He gave her a reassuring wink. He was her guide in this rarefied world, her benefactor. The assistant stopped before a pair of towering frosted glass doors. They are ready for you. Mr. Sterling is already inside. Richard Sterling was the outgoing CEO of Innovate Dynamics, a man in his late 60s who was happy to take his golden parachute and retire to Florida. He was a formality, a bridge between the old and the new. The real power the person Marcus had to conquer was waiting on the other side of those doors. Marcus smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open, stepping into the brightest, most intimidating boardroom he had ever seen. And into the beginning of his end. The boardroom at Vanguard Holdings was less a room and more a theatre for corporate warfare. One entire wall was a seamless pane of glass, offering a godlike view of the city below. The table was a single colossal slab of polished granite, so dark it seemed to absorb the light. Seated around it were a dozen people who radiated an aura of calm, lethal competence. These were the Vanguard executives. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, looking more like a guest than a host. Marcus scanned the faces. There was the CFO, a stern-looking man in his 50s, the head of legal, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, and several other VPs he recognized from industry publications. They were the sharks, and he was here to prove he was one of them. "Marcus, good of you to join us," Richard Sterling said, his voice a little too loud in the hushed room. "Everyone, this is Marcus Thorne, our VP of Marketing at Innovate Dynamics, and his analyst, Tiffany Hayes." Nods were exchanged, cool and appraising. Marcus felt a dozen pairs of eyes sizing him up, and he met them with his most charming, confident smile. He and Tiffany took the 2 empty seats opposite the main board members. He placed his sleek laptop and a leather-bound folio on the table, the movements economical and self-assured. David Chen, his internal rival, and the VP of Operations was seated a few chairs down. David gave him a tight, professional nod. Marcus saw the flicker of jealousy in David's eyes and savored it. David had come alone. Marcus, on the other hand, had brought his star protégé, a visual testament to his leadership and eye for talent. "We're just waiting for our new CEO to join us," the head of legal, a woman named Jessica Miller, stated. Her voice was crisp and brooked no argument. "She is concluding a call with our Tokyo office." She. The word registered in Marcus's mind with a flicker of surprise. He had automatically assumed the new chief would be a man. A woman CEO in this aggressive tech acquisition space was rare. He mentally recalibrated. This was even better. In his experience, he was excellent at charming, powerful women, at playing the part of the indispensable, brilliant male subordinate. To fill the silence, Richard Sterling began making pleasantries. "Marcus has been with Innovate for 12 years, a real pillar of the company. His marketing strategies were key to our growth in the early 2010s. It was faint praise, referencing past glories. Marcus felt a prickle of annoyance. He was about to unveil the future, not rehash the past. He directed a charming smile towards Jessica Miller. "Richard is too kind. The past is prologue. I'm far more excited to discuss the next 5 years. We're on the cusp of penetrating the South American market in a way no one has anticipated." Before anyone could respond, he leaned slightly towards David Chen, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's a different level up here, isn't it? Makes you feel for the ones left behind. I was on the phone with Kate this morning. She was agonizing over which caterer to use for some luncheon. God bless her." He shook his head with a look of fond exasperation. "Different worlds." David offered a non-committal grunt, but Marcus knew the seed was planted. He was painting a picture of himself, a high-flying executive, unburdened by domestic trivialities, married to a simple woman who handled the home front while he conquered the world. It was a crucial part of his personal brand. Tiffany, sitting beside him, preened slightly, feeling the implied contrast. She was part of the real world, his world. The tension in the room suddenly shifted. A palpable wave of deference and respect washed over the Vanguard executives as they subtly straightened in their chairs. Their eyes all turned towards the frosted glass doors. The quiet conversations ceased. "Looks like showtime." Richard Sterling murmured a hint of relief in his tone. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. His moment had arrived. He smoothed his tie one last time, squared his shoulders, and focused on the entrance. He prepared his power smile, the one that conveyed both respect and ambition. This woman, whoever she was about to meet the man who would be the most valuable asset in her newly acquired company. He would make himself undeniable. The heavy glass doors swung inward with a faint, hydraulic hiss. A pair of expensive-looking but understated black heels clicked purposefully on the marble floor. They were followed by the sharp crease of a navy blue pantsuit, tailored with a precision that bespoke immense wealth and a refusal to compromise. The woman who entered was tall and carried herself with an unshakable poise that instantly commanded the room. Her dark hair, which Marcus had last seen in a messy ponytail, was styled in a sleek, elegant chignon at the nape of her neck. Her face, free of makeup that morning, was now expertly and minimally enhanced to highlight her strong cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was one of cool, detached authority. She strode to the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the assembled executives, acknowledging each with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. And then her eyes landed on him. For a horrifying, brain-freezing second, Marcus Thorne's world stopped turning. The blood drained from his face, replaced by an icy dread that started in his stomach and spread through his veins. His confident smirk dissolved his mouth, falling slightly agape. The room, the table, the people, they all blurred into a meaningless background. There was only her, the unassuming housewife. The woman he thought was deciding on canapés. His wife. She stopped at the head of the table, placing a slim tablet before her. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the soft, familiar tone he heard over breakfast. It was a voice honed for command, crisp clear, and laced with steel. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Thank you all for being here. For those of you from Innovate Dynamics, whom I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Catherine Vance. I am the founder and CEO of Vanguard Holdings. She paused, letting her name, her maiden name, and her title sink in. Her cool blue eyes then moved deliberately down the table, past the other executives, past David Chen's stunned face, past Tiffany's utter confusion, and locked directly onto her husband's. A flicker of something cold and sharp passed through them before she addressed him directly, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the room. Mr. Thorne, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in a professional capacity. The words, Mr. Thorne, struck Marcus with the force of a physical blow. It was the name of a stranger, a subordinate, a line item on a balance sheet. In that single formal address, 15 years of shared history of intimacy and marriage were vaporized. He was no longer Marcus, her husband. He was Mr. Thorne, the employee. His mind reeled frantically, trying to assemble the puzzle pieces that were crashing down around him. Catherine Vance. Vance, her maiden name. The name on her old college degrees, the ones he'd packed away in a box in the attic artifacts from a life he thought she'd left behind. Vanguard. Vance. The connection was so obvious, so insultingly simple that he had never once thought to make it. He stared at her, this woman in the power suit, who looked like his wife but felt like an alien queen. The quiet observer from his breakfast table was gone. In her place was a formidable executive who held his entire future in the palm of her hand. The condescending joke he'd made to David Chen just moments earlier replayed in his head, each word a self-inflicted wound. She was agonizing over which caterer to use. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot flush that crept up his neck and burned his ears. Beside him, Tiffany was a statue of confusion. She looked from Catherine to Marcus and back again, her brow furrowed. The resemblance was undeniable, but the context was impossible. She saw the blood drain from Marcus's face and the rigid terror in his posture. A sick, dawning realization began to curdle in her stomach. This powerful, intimidating woman. She couldn't be. Catherine, meanwhile, betrayed no emotion. She was the very picture of corporate control. "Let's begin," she said, her gaze sweeping the room again, deliberately avoiding Marcus now. "As you all know, Vanguard Holdings has officially completed the acquisition of Innovate Dynamics. For many of you at Vanguard, this is business as usual. For our new colleagues from Innovate, I understand this is a time of uncertainty. Let me be clear, my goal is not to dismantle what you've built, but to identify its core strengths, trim its considerable fat, and integrate its viable assets into our global strategy." The phrase, "trim its considerable fat," hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. Every executive from Innovate Dynamics shifted uncomfortably. Marcus felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. "I have spent the last 6 weeks performing a deep dive into every department," Catherine continued, tapping her tablet. A massive screen behind her lit up with complex charts and data streams. Finance operations, R&D, and marketing. I've read every report, analyzed every metric, and reviewed every 5-year plan, which brings us to today's agenda. Her eyes, like a hawk's, finally settled back on Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, I believe you have a presentation for us regarding a proposed expansion into the South American market." It was a command, not a request. Marcus's throat was dry. His hands resting on his laptop were trembling slightly. All the confidence, the swagger he had walked in with had evaporated. He felt naked, exposed, a fool in a $1,000 suit. He looked at the faces around the table. The Vanguard executives were watching him with predatory curiosity. David Chen was staring at him with a mixture of shock and what looked sickeningly like pity. And Tiffany. He risked a glance at her. Her face was pale, her lipstick suddenly garish. The confusion in her eyes had been replaced by the horrified understanding of a person who realizes they have walked willingly into a trap. The boring, placid wife was the CEO. The woman she had dismissed as a sad relic was about to decide her fate. The perfect cover had been blown to smithereens. "Mr. Thorne," Catherine's voice was sharp, now impatient. "We don't have all day." Jessica Miller, the sharp-eyed legal counsel who was clearly Catherine's second-in-command, leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps Mr. Thorne is feeling unwell. The pressure of presenting to a new board can be significant." The undertone was mocking, and Marcus knew she was in on it. She knew everything. Summoning every last shred of his professional facade, Marcus cleared his throat. "No, I'm fine. Of course. My apologies, Madam CEO." The honorific felt like acid on his tongue. He opened his laptop, his fingers fumbling on the keys. The presentation he had been so proud of now seemed juvenile, a child's crayon drawing presented to a master artist. He clicked the file open. The title slide, "Innovate Dynamics, Conquering New Frontiers." Created by Tiffany, flashed onto the main screen. It felt like a joke. He was the one who had been conquered. "Please," Catherine said, gesturing to the screen with a flick of her wrist. "Proceed. Dazzle us." Her voice was laced with an irony so cold, so sharp it could have cut diamonds. And as Marcus Thorne opened his mouth to speak, he knew he wasn't just fighting for a promotion anymore. He was fighting for the very last vestiges of his professional life in front of the woman whose life he had so thoroughly and foolishly underestimated. The unveiling was complete. The dissection was about to begin. Marcus began to speak, his voice, a strained, hollow version of its usual confident boom. He tried to fall back on the familiar cadence of his pitch, the practiced words, and compelling narrative he and Tiffany had rehearsed until it was second nature. But the words felt foreign in his mouth, the concepts flimsy and transparent. Every claim of projected growth and synergistic opportunity sounded like a desperate lie under Catherine's impassive gaze. She let him talk for exactly 7 minutes. He was just hitting his stride on the market penetration strategy for Brazil when her voice cut through his presentation like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Thorne, a question." He stopped mid-sentence. "Yes, Madam CAO." Catherine swiped a finger across her tablet, and the main screen behind her instantly changed. His carefully crafted slide was replaced by a dizzying array of spreadsheets and market analysis reports. "Your entire projection for the Brazilian market is predicated on a 15% annual growth in the consumer electronics sector, with a primary focus on the affluent urban demographic. Is that correct?" Yes. "Our data indicates—" "Whose data?" she interrupted, her tone clinical. "Because my data, compiled from 3 independent global analytics firms, indicates that the sector's growth has stagnated at 4% for the last 18 months, with a projected ceiling of 5% for the next 3 years due to recent tariff implementations. Furthermore, the most significant growth is not in the affluent urban sector, which is already saturated, but in the emerging middle class in secondary cities, a demographic your plan completely ignores." A murmur went through the Vanguard executives. They were looking at the data on the screen, then back at Marcus, their expressions ranging from disappointment to disdain. Moreover, Catherine continued relentless, "Your proposed logistics and distribution partner, a company called Logistica Sul, is currently under federal investigation for bribery and is on the verge of bankruptcy. Did your due diligence not uncover this?" Marcus froze. That was a detail Tiffany was supposed to have vetted. He shot a panicked look in her direction. Tiffany looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her face was ashen. She was shrinking into her chair, trying to become invisible. We were assured of their stability." Marcus stammered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "You were assured?" Catherine's eyebrow arched slightly. "Vanguard does not operate on assurances, Mr. Thorne. It operates on verifiable facts. Your marketing budget proposal of $50 million for the first year is not only inflated, it's aimed at the wrong people in the wrong places, using a potentially criminal partner. Other than that, it's a stellar plan." The sarcasm was devastating. A few of the Vanguard board members couldn't suppress faint, cruel smiles. David Chen stared fixedly at the tabletop, refusing to look at Marcus, granting him the small mercy of not witnessing his complete and utter evisceration. Catherine wasn't finished. She systematically and without a shred of emotion dismantled his entire presentation. She questioned his advertising spend, pointing out that his media buy plan was based on 3-year-old viewership data. She shredded his personnel plan, noting that he had budgeted for a massive new office in São Paulo, without once considering a more cost-effective remote workforce a model Vanguard had perfected. With each point she made, she wasn't just destroying his professional credibility. She was annihilating the central myth of their marriage. He was the brilliant businessman, the titan of industry. She was the domestic manager. But in this room, it was clear who possessed the superior intellect, the sharper instincts, and the more rigorous work ethic. He had been playing checkers while she was mastering multidimensional chess. Finally, she turned her attention to the financial projections. "Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice making Tiffany jump in her seat. "I see you co-authored this report." Tiffany swallowed hard, her voice a tiny squeak. "Yes, Madam CEO." "These sales projections," Catherine said, circling a number on the screen with a digital red pen. "A 400% increase in market share in 2 years, What model did you use to arrive at this figure? It was a proprietary algorithm based on synergistic market capture. Tiffany managed reciting a meaningless buzzword they had concocted to sound impressive. Catherine's expression remained unchanged. A proprietary algorithm, I see. Can you show it to me? Or is the formula as fictional as the growth it predicts? Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely and totally out of her depth. She was a junior analyst who had been so dazzled by her affair with a senior VP that she'd let her work get sloppy, assuming his authority would shield her from scrutiny. She had never imagined coming under the microscope of a CEO who actually read the fine print. The illusion was shattered. Marcus wasn't a god. He was a fraud, and she had tied her career, her reputation, to him. The promises of a directorship and a future together now seemed like a sick joke. She felt used not for her body, but for her complicity. She had been the eager, ambitious fool who had done his sloppy homework for him. Catherine turned her cold gaze back to Marcus. Your strategy, Mr. Thorne, is not just flawed. It's lazy. It's a work of profound arrogance, built on outdated assumptions and a shocking lack of diligence. It's the kind of work I would expect from a company that is failing, which I suppose is why I was able to acquire it at such a favorable price. She let the final insult land, and the silence in the room was absolute. Richard Sterling looked pale, realizing the company he had led for 20 years was being branded as a sinking ship. Catherine closed her tablet. The screen behind her went blank. The execution was over. That will be all for the group presentation. The Vanguard team and I will now break for a strategy session. Mr. Sterling, you're welcome to join us. Mr. Chen, I'd like you to stay as well. I have some questions about Innovate's operational efficiencies. She stood a clear dismissal. Mr. Thorne? Ms. Hayes? You are excused. The words hung in the air. Excused, dismissed like schoolchildren. Every other executive from Innovate was being asked to stay, to consult, to be a part of the future. But not him. Not the great VP of marketing. Numbly, Marcus closed his laptop. He couldn't bring himself to look at anyone. He could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their contempt. He stood on shaky legs. Tiffany scrambled to gather her things, her hands trembling so badly she dropped her pen, which rolled under the massive table. She didn't dare retrieve it. She just wanted to escape. As Marcus walked towards the door, his entire professional life in ruins, Catherine's voice stopped him one last time. It was softer now, but no less commanding. Actually, Mr. Thorne, a word. In my office, now. Tiffany fled the room without a backward glance. The heavy glass doors hissed shut behind her, leaving Marcus alone with his wife, his new boss, and the shattered fragments of his once perfect life. Catherine's private office was adjacent to the boardroom. It was even more breathtaking, a corner suite with 2 walls of glass that made it feel as though you were floating above Chicago. The decor was minimalist and tasteful, a large oak desk, a few carefully chosen pieces of modern art, and shelves lined not with awards, but with books on economics, philosophy, and engineering. It was the office of a thinker, a builder. Marcus walked in like a man condemned, his footsteps silent on the plush grey carpet. Catherine walked past him to stand before the window, her back to him, looking down at the city. The power dynamic was absolute. She didn't offer him a seat. Silence stretched for a long, agonizing minute. Marcus's mind raced, searching for a strategy, an angle, a way to salvage this nightmare. Should he apologize, beg feign ignorance, rage? Every option seemed futile. 15 years, Marcus, Catherine said, finally, her voice calm and reflective, No longer the icy CEO, but something far more dangerous, the woman he had wronged. 15 years ago, I had just received a patent for a data compression algorithm that was set to revolutionize the industry. I had venture capitalists lining up. I was 28 years old. She turned from the window to face him. Her expression was not angry, but weary, as if she were examining a disappointing specimen. And then you got that promotion to senior director. You said we had to move to Chicago. You said you needed my support. You said one career in the family was enough, and yours was already on a clear trajectory. You asked me to choose. Kate, He started, his voice cracking. Don't, she said, holding up a hand. Let me finish. I was in love. I was naive. I believed in the partnership. So I chose you. I put my patent in a drawer. I put my dreams on hold. And I became Mrs. Catherine Thorne, the perfect corporate wife. I planned the dinners. I charmed your bosses. I created the serene, effortless home life that allowed you to focus solely on your ambition. Every word was a perfectly placed stone building a wall between them. For a while, I even believed the story you told everyone. She continued, taking a step closer. That I had simply retired. That I was happy with my charities and my book clubs. But then I started to see it. The condescension, the little jokes at my expense, the way you'd explain simple financial concepts to me, as if I were a child. You didn't just want a supportive wife, Marcus. You wanted a smaller one. You needed me to be small so you could feel big. He flinched. The truth of her words was undeniable. He had done all those things. I started to get bored, she said, her voice turning colder. And then about 5 years ago, I got angry. So I took out that old patent. I used the inheritance my parents left me, the money you always called my little hobby fund, and I started a small consulting firm from the study you never used. I hired 2 brilliant young coders. I worked while you were on your business trips and late-night client dinners. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The later nights she spent on her laptop, which he'd dismissed as online shopping, her frequent lunches with friends in the financial district, it had all been happening right under his nose. Vance Consulting became Vanguard Holdings. She stated simply, we didn't just invest, we built, we created, we innovated. While you were busy rearranging the deck chairs at a stagnant company, I was building a fleet of battleships. And when the opportunity came to acquire Innovate Dynamics, well, the irony was just too delicious to pass up. Finally, the dam of Marcus's shock broke, replaced by a desperate, sputtering rage. So this is all some elaborate revenge plot. You bought my company just to humiliate me, because I had an affair. Catherine actually laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. An affair, Marcus. You are so breathtakingly arrogant. You think this is about Tiffany Hayes. She's a symptom, not the disease. I've known about your flings for years. Tiffany the paralegal from 2 years ago, the one in HR before that. You're as predictable as you are pathetic. Your infidelity was just confirmation of what I already knew. Our marriage was a hollow shell, a business arrangement where I was the silent, unpaid partner. She walked to her desk and picked up a thick manila envelope, holding it out to him. This isn't about revenge, Marcus. This is about a course correction. My course correction. He didn't take the envelope. He knew what it was. Those are divorce papers, she said. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. The penthouse is in my name. The assets from my inheritance are firewalled. You will get exactly what you are entitled to under the prenuptial agreement we signed, which, if you recall, you insisted upon to protect your future earnings. As for your professional life, Her CEO persona snapped back into place. Your performance today was abysmal. Your department is bloated and ineffective. Your leadership is based on ego, not results. You are a liability to my company. However, firing you on day one would be messy. So here's what's going to happen. Your department is being restructured, effective immediately. Your role as VP of Marketing is redundant. We are creating a new temporary position for you Special Projects Consultant reporting directly to David Chen, the final perfect humiliation. He would be reporting to his rival. You will be tasked with overseeing the orderly transition of assets and accounts until your position is eliminated in 3 to 6 months. Your bonus is forfeit. Your stock options are now under the control of the new parent company. You will clean out your office by the end of the week. Is that clear, Mr. Thorne? Marcus stood there utterly defeated. He had lost his wife, his mistress, his job, his reputation, and his dignity in the span of a single morning. The man who had walked into the building, a king, was leaving it as less than a peasant. He was a ghost, a footnote in the story of Catherine Vance's meteoric rise. "Kate, please!" He whispered the name, a desperate plea for a connection that no longer existed. Catherine looked at him one last time, her blue eyes holding not a trace of pity, only a profound and final sense of closure. "My name," she said, her voice, as hard and beautiful as a diamond, "is Miss Vance." 6 months later, the Chicago autumn was giving way to the first bite of winter. The view from the 60th floor office of Vanguard Holdings was crystalline. Catherine Vance stood before the window, not as a prisoner in a gilded cage, but as a sovereign surveying her realm. The company was thriving under her leadership. She had trimmed the fat from Innovate Dynamics as promised, and had reinvested in its core R&D, breathing new life into a company that had been slowly suffocating under complacent, self-serving management. Her days were long and demanding, filled with conference calls to Tokyo, London, and São Paulo, with high-stakes negotiations and billion-dollar decisions. But she had never felt more alive, more herself. The soft, unassuming mask of Mrs. Thorne had been packed away with the expensive but useless evening gowns she no longer wore. She was Catherine Vance, and her name was spoken with respect and a touch of fear in the circles that mattered. Jessica Miller entered the office without knocking a sign of their close partnership. "The quarterly reports are in. We're up 12% across the board. The Innovate integration, as you so clinically call it, is a roaring success. David Chen is working out brilliantly as the new COO. "David is talented," Catherine said, turning from the window. "He just needed a leader who valued data over ego." "Speaking of ego," Jessica said, a wry smile on her face, "I saw him on my way in the lobby." Catherine didn't have to ask who he was. Today was Marcus's last day. His 6-month consulting period was over. It had been, by all accounts, a deeply humbling experience for him. Stripped of his title, his corner office, and his authority, he had been forced to witness the company he thought he knew transformed by the wife he thought he owned. He had done the work assigned to him with a grim, joyless efficiency, a ghost haunting the hallways of his former kingdom. "How did he look?" Catherine asked, her curiosity purely academic. "Smaller," Jessica replied, "and older. He was carrying one of those standard cardboard boxes with a plant and a picture frame sticking out. The ultimate corporate walk of shame." Catherine nodded slowly. There was no triumph in her no gloating. That had burned out of her system months ago. All that remained was a quiet, profound sense of rightness, of a balance restored. Later that day, as she was heading to the private elevator, she saw him. He was standing near the security desk, waiting for his visitor's pass to be deactivated. He was wearing a suit that now seemed a little too large for his frame. He looked up, and their eyes met across the vast marble expanse of the lobby. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out resignation. He gave her a short, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't an apology, he was likely incapable of a true one, but it was an acknowledgement, an admission of defeat. Catherine returned the nod, just as brief, just as final. There was nothing left to say. She stepped into the elevator, and as the door slid shut, she didn't look back. His story was over. Hers was just beginning. As for the others, Richard Sterling was happily golfing in Florida, oblivious. David Chen was proving to be a brilliant and loyal second-in-command, grateful for the opportunity to work for a CEO who respected his talent. And Tiffany Hayes. She had resigned from Innovate Dynamics the day after the meeting. The last Catherine had heard, she had moved to a small marketing firm in Seattle, having learned a brutal lesson about the dangers of hitching your wagon to a falling star. That evening, Catherine didn't go straight home to the penthouse, which was now truly hers, a space she was slowly redecorating to reflect her own taste. Instead, she had her driver take her to a small, unassuming building in a quieter part of the city. It was the headquarters of a non-profit. She had recently started funding a mentorship program for young women in STEM fields. She spent 2 hours there, talking to bright, eager young engineers and coders, listening to their ideas, offering her own advice. She saw the same fire in their eyes that she had once had the fire Marcus had tried to extinguish. In helping them, she was honoring the woman she had been, and cementing the woman she had become. Driving home as the city lights twinkled below, Catherine Vance felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in 15 years. She hadn't just reclaimed her career or her name. She had reclaimed her soul. She had shattered the gilded cage not with a sledgehammer of revenge, but with the quiet, unstoppable force of her own brilliance. And in the silent, powerful hum of the city, she heard the sound of her own limitless future. A year to the day after the acquisition, snow was falling over Chicago, dusting the city in a blanket of pristine white. From her office, Catherine watched the flakes drift down, each one unique and silent. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind of restructuring, innovation, and growth. Vanguard had never been stronger, and the integrated parts of Innovate Dynamics were now its most profitable assets. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. It was a link to an industry blog with a short note. "Thought you might find this amusing." Catherine tapped the link. The article was a dry piece about quarterly earnings for a mid-tier logistics firm based out of Milwaukee. Her eyes scanned the text until she found the name mentioned in a short paragraph about the firm's new regional sales team. Marcus Thorne. He had been hired as a senior account manager. It was a respectable job, but a staggering fall from grace for a man who had once been a vice president on the verge of the C-suite. He was no longer in the glossy pages of business journals, but buried in the fine print of a minor trade publication. Catherine felt a brief, clinical flicker of something, not pity, but a detached acknowledgement of a fate deserved. He was an echo from a life that no longer felt like hers, a ghost story whose power to frighten had long since faded. She closed the article and turned her attention back to the documents on her desk. They were the first annual reports from her STEM mentorship program. Applications had tripled. 3 of her first mentees had just received full scholarships to MIT. This was her real legacy. It wasn't in the destruction of one man's ego, but in the construction of futures for countless brilliant young women. She was building an empire not just of profit, but of potential. The snow continued to fall, burying the old world and promising a new one. Catherine Vance picked up her pen, a faint smile on her lips, and went back to work, the echo of Marcus Thorne's name already forgotten. What a story of poetic justice and ultimate empowerment. A man who saw his wife as a decorative accessory to his life learns in the most public and brutal way that she was never the supporting character, she was the author of the entire story. Catherine Vance's journey from a supposedly content housewife to a powerhouse CEO is a powerful reminder that you should never ever underestimate the person sitting across the breakfast table from you. Her victory wasn't just in exposing her husband's affair, it was in reclaiming her own identity and proving that her greatest strength was the very intelligence he tried so hard to belittle. What would you have done in Catherine's shoes? Would you have been as cold and calculated, or would you have sought a different kind of justice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were on the edge of your seat, watching Marcus Thorne's world crumble, do us a huge favor and hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a good tale of karma, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We have many more stories of unexpected twists and powerful reckonings coming your way. You won't want to miss them.